Hey there, and welcome. You've just stepped into a space where curiosity feels warm and science drifts softly between wonder and rest. Before we begin, listen closely. This story is meant to be heard, not rushed. If you enjoy these calm explorations into the mysterious corners of thought, take a moment to subscribe and share what you think down in the comments. I'd love to know where your mind goes when you listen. All right, let's get comfortable and look up. Tonight, our quiet journey takes us far beyond the edge of our blue world, past the glow of cities, beyond the hum of satellites, into a question that's tugged at the human imagination for decades. What if we're not alone? And more than that, what if someone's watching us? Not in the way cameras record or sensors measure, but the way a patient observer might study a delicate world through glass. This idea has a name, the zoo hypothesis, and it begins with something simple: humility. If there are civilizations out there more advanced than ours, maybe they already know we exist. But for reasons of their own, they've chosen not to interfere. Maybe they're just watching quietly as we build, destroy, fall in love, and learn. Maybe we're part of a vast cosmic nature preserve. Before we go further, I wonder, where are you listening from tonight? Is it late with the lights dim and the air still, a soft glow on your screen? Or is the sun just beginning to rise where you are, brushing the window with light as your day begins? Wherever you are, you and I share this same small moment under the same wide universe, and that alone feels worth noticing. If this gentle curiosity feels like a breath of calm in a noisy world, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like or subscribed. It helps this little corner of quiet reach others who might be lying awake tonight, wondering the same things. Now, take a slow breath. Let your thoughts loosen. Settle in. Because before we dive into the science, logic, and quiet possibility behind the zoo hypothesis, remember, this is really a story about perspective, about how we see ourselves in the vast unknown, and how it might feel if someone, somewhere, was seeing us too. The idea that other beings exist beyond Earth isn't new. Long before telescopes or satellites, ancient civilizations looked up and filled the stars with gods, spirits, and watchers. The Egyptians saw the heavens as a place of order and judgment. The Greeks imagined deities gazing down from Mount Olympus or scattered across constellations. In a sense, humanity has always lived with the feeling of being seen, a comfort and a fear. The zoo hypothesis just moves that ancient gaze out of myth and into science. Instead of gods, it imagines civilizations. Instead of Olympus, a cluster of stars. Instead of judgment, quiet observation. The question that leads us here begins with something called the Fermi paradox. In 1950, physicist Enrico Fermi, during a casual lunch, asked a question that still echoes through science today. If our galaxy contains billions of stars, many older than the Sun, and if even a small fraction have planets, and if some of those planets could support life, then where is everybody? Why is the universe so silent? Fermi's question revealed a strange contradiction. Statistically, we shouldn't be alone, and yet we seem to be. In the 1970s, astronomer John Ball offered an elegant answer. Maybe they are out there. Maybe they see us. But like careful zookeepers, they keep their distance, letting us develop naturally without interference. It's a theory that blends astrophysics with a kind of cosmic ethics, suggesting that restraint and patience are signs of wisdom, not indifference. In this view, the universe isn't empty, it's quiet, by choice. And that's not such an alien idea. On Earth, we already do similar things. Biologists watch animals from hidden blinds so they don't change the creature's behavior. Anthropologists once approached isolated tribes carefully, knowing that contact could destroy fragile cultures. Even filmmakers hide cameras to capture life as it truly is. If we, with all our limited understanding, can recognize the value of non-interference, imagine what a civilization millions of years ahead of us might understand. The question most people ask next is simple. Why? Why wouldn't an advanced civilization want to make contact? Wouldn't curiosity drive them too? Maybe not. Think about the scale of difference. We've had electricity for only a few hundred years, spaceflight for decades, and interstellar communication for barely a handful of years. If they exist, they could be millions of years ahead. What kind of conversation could we possibly have? To them, our language might sound like birdsong. Our conflicts might look like weather patterns. Our progress, like the early stirring of something fragile, not yet stable. Maybe they avoid contact not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. And that leads to another question. If the zoo hypothesis is true, what would it mean for us? How would we behave, knowing unseen eyes might be watching from across the cosmos? It's a thought that forces us inward. We, as a species, become the exhibit, our kindness and cruelty, our art and our chaos, all part of a distant observation. Would we feel ashamed, proud? Or would we simply carry on, pretending not to notice the glass between us and them? Even if no one is actually watching, just wondering changes us. When we imagine an audience, even a hypothetical one, we start to judge ourselves differently. That's human nature. We act differently when we believe we're being seen. That's why we have cameras in cities. But it's also why we have theatres, diaries, and stories. Observation shapes behavior, and cosmic observation pushes that idea to its limit. The zoo hypothesis might sound like science fiction, but it's connected to real scientific principles. One is the prime directive, borrowed from fiction, but grounded in genuine ethical debate. If contact could cause cultural collapse, advanced species might choose non-intervention. Another idea is the detection threshold, the possibility that alien signals exist all around us, but we simply can't detect them yet. Just as early humans couldn't perceive radio waves, we might lack the tools or understanding to recognize what's already there. The universe might be speaking, we just don't know the language. There's also a social theory behind it. Imagine that every civilization that becomes technologically advanced eventually learns the danger of being too loud. The universe might be vast, but not always safe. Some civilizations might choose silence, while others enforce it. In a galaxy like that, new species, like us, would be allowed to grow in peace until they prove they're ready. That paints a picture of a quiet, organized cosmic community, a galaxy of polite but distant neighbors. When we send messages into space like the Arecibo signal or the Voyager Golden Record, we're doing more than reaching out. We're declaring that we exist, that we want to belong to something greater. Those messages carry the sounds of our world, our languages, our hopes. To anyone listening, they're not just data, they're introductions. And yet, even as we send them, we do it from a place of uncertainty. We don't know who might be listening. That blend of courage and innocence, that's what makes us human. There's comfort in thinking we might be watched. It means we're not alone. That somewhere out there minds exist that understand patience, empathy, and restraint. It makes our story feel like part of something larger. But there's unease too. The idea of being monitored without consent stirs up our old fears. Surveillance, manipulation, loss of privacy. That's why this theory divides people. For some, it's a story of protection. For others, it's one of control. If there are watchers, they'd see it all. Our beauty and destruction, our creativity and waste. They'd see a species sending machines to other worlds while struggling to care for its own. A world both brilliant and reckless. Maybe that's why they stay silent. Maybe they're waiting for us to find balance. to prove that we can know we're not alone without losing ourselves in the realization. It's a generous thought, and one that fits the quiet kindness at the heart of the zoo hypothesis. The night sky seems calm, but it's anything but still. Everywhere above us, stars pulse, galaxies collide, and light travels for billions of years before brushing past a telescope's lens. Somewhere out there could be a civilization so ancient that the entire lifespan of humanity has lasted only a blink of their time. Our own Milky Way holds over 100 billion stars, and beyond it, there are hundreds of billions more galaxies. The scale is so vast that the silence itself begins to feel suspicious. Maybe what we call emptiness isn't really absence, it's restraint. When radio astronomers search for alien signals, they're not just listening for noise, they're listening for patterns, something that breaks the randomness of the cosmic static. At first, even natural phenomena fooled us. Pulsars, with their precise flashes, were once jokingly labeled LGM, little green men. But nature loves rhythm. The real challenge is telling the difference between communication and coincidence. That's where the zoo hypothesis comes in, the idea that we're not alone, but deliberately being ignored. If we're the animals in the zoo, then the keepers have drawn the blinds. But what if the watchers don't see individuals at all? What if they observe us as a pattern, a civilization-sized signal made of energy use, atmospheric shifts, and electromagnetic footprints? To them, humanity might appear as a glowing patch of activity on a small blue world, a flicker of organized chaos in a quiet corner of the galaxy. That thought is humbling, but strangely poetic. Even if we are just one small exhibit in a cosmic menagerie, it means we belong to something vast. The zoo hypothesis isn't about belief. It's an invitation to wonder. It asks us to imagine ourselves not as the center of the universe, but as part of its ecology. Just as we study wildlife without expecting them to understand us, maybe the cosmos studies us the same way. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist simply to remind us of scale. That may be the quiet truth at the heart of this idea, to see ourselves from the outside with both curiosity and compassion. And as we drift through the darkness, sending out our signals and scanning the silence, the question remains open, gently unresolved. If someone is watching, what are they waiting for? A sign of peace? A moment of readiness? Or maybe they decided long ago that the best way to help a young species grow is to let it believe it's alone. The night continues, vast, silent, and full of unanswered questions. A soft hum of human thought stretches outward, reaching for connection. The story doesn't end here. It extends toward the edges of imagination, where science and mystery meet. Because out there, beyond the stars, might be minds older than time itself, watching patiently from behind the glass. When you stare into the night sky long enough, you start to feel it, that gentle pressure of the unknown. It's not fear exactly, more like awareness. Every point of light might be another sun, another world, maybe even another observer staring back. The universe looks calm from our perspective, but in truth, it's a restless ocean of energy and motion. Stars are born, collide, fade, and reform. Everything moves. Everything changes. And somewhere in that motion, hidden by distance or design, might lie the answer to one of humanity's oldest questions. If life is common, why does it feel like we're alone? The zoo hypothesis suggests the silence is intentional, that someone, somewhere, drew the curtain on purpose. Not as a barrier or shield, but as an act of choice, a decision to remain unseen. To understand where this idea came from, we have to rewind to the middle of the 20th century. Astronomy was evolving fast. We had finally built radio telescopes powerful enough to listen beyond our own solar system. For the first time, The question of life elsewhere wasn't just philosophy, it was a measurable hypothesis. When scientists at the Arecibo Observatory sent a radio message toward the M13 star cluster, it was humanity's first deliberate hello to the galaxy, a gesture of optimism. But the silence that followed raised another question. If intelligent life is so likely, why haven't we heard from anyone? That tension became known as the Fermi paradox, the contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial life and the lack of evidence for it. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy, many older than our sun. Countless have planets. Some are in habitable zones where water and life could exist. Even if a small percentage of those planets evolved intelligent beings, the numbers suggest there should be civilizations everywhere. Given enough time, at least one should have reached us. And yet, nothing. No messages, no visitors, no cosmic traffic. In 1973, MIT radio astronomer John A. Ball proposed the zoo hypothesis as one possible answer. He suggested that extraterrestrial civilizations might already be aware of Earth, but are deliberately avoiding contact, to let us evolve naturally the way zoologists observe animals in the wild. It was an elegant metaphor, and unsettlingly plausible. It didn't rely on extinction or distance, but on ethics. It imagined intelligence guided by restraint, a galaxy that practices non-interference. To many, that made sense. Silence itself could be a kind of message, a choice, not an accident. The difference between absence and avoidance is subtle but enormous. It changes the tone of our solitude. It means the quiet might not be empty at all. Imagine a civilization 1,000,000 years older than ours, one that has mastered interstellar travel or technology that defies our physics. To them, we might look fragile, chaotic, unpredictable. They might watch us the way we watch wildlife, curious but cautious. Maybe they're waiting to see how we handle our planet, how we treat each other, how we respond to the first whisper of cosmic awareness. There's a moral layer to that idea too. Non-interference might not be indifference, it could be compassion. History has shown us what happens when advanced societies meet isolated ones. Disease, exploitation, collapse, the destruction of cultures that were never ready. If intelligent beings elsewhere have learned that lesson, perhaps they've chosen patience over interference. To them, Earth could be a young experiment, a civilization still finding its footing. Maybe the zoo isn't built out of kindness, but curiosity. Maybe we're not being protected, just observed. From their view, we could be one of millions of evolving species catalogued across the cosmos. The experiment is to watch what happens when intelligence unfolds on its own, and the fact that we've started looking for them might be part of what they've been waiting for all along. Think about it. The universe holds more stars than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. The odds that we're the only intelligent life are almost impossible. The zoo hypothesis is one of the few explanations that allows for both abundance and silence, for a galaxy full of civilizations that simply choose not to answer. If that's true, then our isolation isn't defined by emptiness, but by self-restraint, a kind of cosmic etiquette. Testing the hypothesis doesn't require technology. It requires perspective. We need to imagine how civilizations might see each other across unimaginable distances and time. If an alien civilization 1,000 light years away looked at Earth, they'd be seeing us 1,000 years in the past. They'd see no electricity, no radio, just an ancient world. Even the closest stars would show them our history, not our present. To watch across light years is to see through time. So if they are observing us, they're not watching who we are, but who we were. Our earliest radio waves and TV broadcasts have been expanding outward for barely a century, forming a growing bubble of electromagnetic noise just a few hundred light years wide. In cosmic terms, that's tiny. But within that bubble, any patient observer could detect the faint, structured patterns of intelligent life, a pulse, a rhythm, a frequency, enough to recognize awareness. And that realization brings both pride and unease. Pride, because it means we've become visible in the vastness. Unease, because we have no control over who's watching or how they interpret what they see. We don't know if our broadcasts are viewed as the first words of a promising civilization or the noisy chatter of something not yet ready for contact. The zoo hypothesis holds that they're listening and choosing silence, waiting for us to grow, to mature, to reach the point where we understand what true contact means. To them, centuries might feel like minutes. Time for them might flow in millennia. Waiting 1,000 years for us to grow might seem insignificant from their perspective. There's also the chance that we're not the only ones being observed. Maybe other worlds are under quiet watch too, each at its own stage of development, each unaware of the others. If intelligent life arises often enough, there could be countless zoos scattered throughout the galaxy, each one isolated by design. Perhaps contact is only allowed once a species proves it can handle awareness responsibly. Maybe there's even an initiation, a kind of test we haven't yet recognized. The day we solve the paradox might not come from discovering them, but from proving we're ready to be discovered. Critics of the zoo hypothesis argue that it's impossible to prove or disprove. Any evidence of alien restraint would, by its very nature, remain hidden. It's like trying to prove no one is watching you by staring harder into the dark. But others see its value not in proof, but in perspective. It forces us to reflect on our own behavior as a species under potential observation. It asks what kind of civilization we appear to be from afar: noisy, divided, emotional, inventive. It asks what kind of species we want to become. Some scientists have tried to test the idea indirectly by modeling galactic behavior. If interstellar travel is even slightly possible, then over millions of years, a blink in cosmic time, a single civilization could explore or even colonize the entire Milky Way. That means if anyone began long ago, they could already be everywhere. So the lack of evidence doesn't point to inability, it points to choice. The barrier between us and them could be an agreed boundary, a cosmic curtain drawn for reasons we can't yet understand. Maybe there's a rule that young civilizations must reach a certain level of stability before contact is permitted. Maybe we're still too unpredictable. Philosophically, the idea touches something ancient in human thought, the sense that we're being watched, guided, or judged. Across cultures and ages, people have believed in higher powers, gods, spirits, ancestors, observing from beyond. The zoo hypothesis transforms that intuition into science, stripping away mysticism, but keeping the feeling of an unseen audience. It's a modern echo of something timeless, the Watchers as a new pantheon, distant, silent, but ever present in imagination. And if there really is a curtain, it raises the question, what lies beyond it? Could there be vast networks of civilizations communicating with one another, sharing knowledge across light years while we remain in the dark? Could our own solar system already host silent probes, tiny autonomous machines designed to observe without interfering? Some scientists have even speculated about lurkers, hypothetical devices hidden in stable orbits or on the far side of the moon, quietly collecting data. It sounds speculative, but it's hardly impossible. We already send probes to other planets. Why couldn't someone have done the same long before we learned to listen? And even if such watchers exist, they'd face the same question we're now beginning to ask ourselves. What happens when the observed becomes the observer? Every year, our telescopes grow sharper, our sensors more sensitive. We can now detect exoplanets, measure their atmospheres, even estimate their surface conditions. In a small way, we're doing what the zoo hypothesis imagines on a galactic scale. We too are becoming the watchers. Perhaps every civilization eventually reaches this point, the balance between curiosity and caution, a recognition that observation isn't always harmless. Maybe the curtain isn't one-sided. While we imagine ourselves being watched, we might also be taking part, unknowingly, in a much larger system. A galaxy where observation is mutual but invisible, where everyone listens but no one speaks first. In such a system, silence itself becomes communication. The absence of interference might mean respect or fear. Either way, it maintains balance. The cosmos remains immense, full of life perhaps, yet perfectly quiet. What makes the zoo hypothesis so compelling isn't that it claims to know the truth, it's that it gives shape to our uncertainty. It turns our loneliness into meaning. It suggests that silence might have purpose, even if it's an illusion. It holds up a mirror, showing us a civilization just beginning to understand how fragile and precious consciousness really is. We look up at the stars, wondering who might be looking back, and in that very act, we become part of the story. Maybe the curtain isn't just between us and them, maybe it's within us, the line between what we know and what we're ready to understand. When we cross it, the universe might open just a little more. Until then, the silence remains both mystery and mercy, a patient pause in a long conversation between minds. Above us, the night stretches endlessly, scattered with ancient light, and we keep listening, not just for a voice in the dark, but for proof that we've already been part of something greater all along. The curtain may still be closed, but maybe that's what makes the waiting extraordinary. Because on the other side, whether it's filled with eyes or emptiness, lies the same truth. We are not just looking at the universe might be looking back. For as long as humans have looked at the stars, we've wondered if something, or someone, might be looking back. That impulse has fueled both science and myth, from the first fireside stories to the first telescopes. And yet, no matter how far we've looked or how long we've listened, the universe has answered with the same steady quiet. No confirmed signals, no undeniable visitors, only the hum of natural forces and the rhythm of physics. The more advanced our technology becomes, the deeper the silence seems to grow. It's not the quiet after a conversation, it's the quiet of infinity. A stillness stretching across billions of light years. That's what scientists began calling the Great Silence. At first it didn't seem strange. The universe is enormous, and our instruments were primitive, limited by both imagination and capability. But as our tools improved, our expectations grew. We thought we'd find something: radio beacons, laser bursts, artificial structures. Instead, the sky stayed silent. The modern search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, began in the 1960s. Decades later, it has yielded little more than background noise and false alarms. Each generation of telescopes has expanded our reach and deepened the mystery. By probability, the galaxy should be full of life. By observation, it looks empty. That contradiction became its own kind of puzzle, not just a lack of evidence, but evidence of absence. Why is the universe so quiet? Over time, theories have multiplied, some hopeful, some grim. Maybe intelligent life is rare. Maybe it tends to destroy itself before it can spread. Maybe distances are simply too great. Or maybe, as the zoo hypothesis suggests, the galaxy is full of watchers who've chosen silence over interference. Each answer says as much about us as it does about the stars. When we imagine motives for that silence, we reveal our own, our fears, our hopes, our assumptions about intelligence itself. We expect curiosity because we are curious. We expect communication because we crave it. But intelligence might not always mean conversation. The first scientific efforts to detect alien life were built on optimism. The belief that if we could just listen hard enough, we'd hear someone. SETI focused on universal frequencies like the hydrogen line, assuming any advanced civilization would understand the same physics. For decades, observatories scanned the skies, collecting data, filtering noise, chasing patterns. There were thrilling moments, spikes, signals, rhythms that seemed deliberate. But they always dissolved into natural explanations, pulsars, quasars, satellites, static. In the end, the universe returned to its quiet hum, and slowly, scientists began to wonder, maybe the universe isn't empty at all. Maybe it's just quiet in ways we can't yet perceive. Perhaps advanced civilizations communicate through methods beyond our physics, quantum entanglement, gravitational waves, something we don't even have words for. Maybe the silence isn't theirs, maybe it's ours, the sound of our own ignorance, still tuning in to the wrong channel. The comparison often made is that of ants trying to interpret human conversation through vibrations in the dirt. The message could be all around them, yet they wouldn't know what it meant, just as we might not know how to interpret what's already out there. But there's another idea, one that makes scientists uneasy. Maybe the silence isn't accidental. Maybe it's deliberate. Not on our part, but on theirs. In 2010, physicist Stephen Webb reviewed more than 50 possible answers to the Fermi paradox. Among them was a haunting one, that civilizations advanced enough to master interstellar communication also learn to stay hidden. The galaxy might be full of intelligent life, cautious and quiet, aware that broadcasting their presence could attract the wrong kind of attention. From that point of view, silence becomes a form of self-defense. A galaxy where everyone listens but no one speaks would look exactly like the one we see. If the zoo hypothesis holds any truth, this cosmic quiet might be a shared choice, an unspoken code of conduct among civilizations, a kind of galactic etiquette, a mutual understanding to watch without interfering. It makes sense, especially in a crowded universe. Direct contact could cause cultural collapse or even physical harm. A simple transmission could completely upend a young species' understanding of its place in the cosmos. So maybe the courteous thing to do is to wait, to observe from afar until that civilization shows it's ready. That image doesn't describe an empty galaxy. It describes one filled with structure and restraint, an unseen order hidden beneath the glitter of stars. There's a quiet irony here. The more advanced our technology becomes, the more we begin to resemble the watchers themselves. We too are learning when to speak and when to stay silent. After decades of sending messages into space, some scientists now suggest we stop. Broadcasting our presence, they argue, could expose us to risks we don't yet understand. Others counter that any civilization capable of harming us would already know we exist. The debate itself captures the psychological tension at the heart of the great silence, our longing to be heard colliding with our instinct to hide. We want to be noticed, but only by something kind. We want to be part of the conversation, but only on our own terms. For those who work in SETI, the silence is both maddening and mesmerizing. It pushes them to confront the limits of human perception. When we search for alien intelligence, we're really searching for reflections of ourselves, technology that looks like ours, reasoning that mirrors ours. But life elsewhere may have evolved under conditions so foreign that our definitions simply don't apply. Maybe communication itself isn't universal. Maybe the very concept of exchanging information is uniquely human. To a species that perceives reality through senses we can't imagine, our entire civilization might be invisible, not because of distance, but because of difference. Some researchers even suggest we might already have received alien signals. We just didn't recognize them. Radio telescope data are vast and chaotic, full of noise and static that must be filtered and decoded. Patterns that appear random could easily conceal intention. But without the right frame of reference, we wouldn't know what to look for. Our algorithms search for what we understand, not for what we've never imagined. The great silence, then, could be partly of our own making, the product of limited imagination. We listen through a narrow keyhole, and the universe obliges by matching our expectations. There's also the matter of time. Civilizations rise and fall. The lifespan of a technological species might be a flicker compared to the age of the galaxy. Two civilizations could miss each other entirely, not separated by space, but by centuries. One transmits for 1,000 years and fades away. Another appears 1,000,000 years later and finds nothing. In that sense, the great silence could be the echo of civilizations passing each other, like ships in an endless night, their voices fading, their traces lost to dust and distance. From where we stand, the silence feels absolute, but the universe has never been truly silent. Even the void hums with energy. The faint afterglow of the Big Bang still ripples through space as background radiation. It's the oldest signal we've ever detected, a whisper from creation itself. The universe has always been full of noise, just not the kind that carries intent. And yet, the human brain resists that indifference. We're wired to find meaning, even in static. We search for purpose in randomness. That's what makes the great silence so haunting. It feels personal, even when it isn't. The longer we listen, the more the silence turns into a mirror. It reflects our uncertainty back at us, forcing the question of what kind of species we really are. Are we the kind that reaches out, or the kind that waits? Do we deserve to be found, or must we prove ourselves first? The absence of a reply pushes us to imagine the roles reversed. Would we contact a young, impulsive species that broadcasts its existence to the cosmos? Or would we stay quiet, watching from a safe distance, hoping it matures before shouting too loudly? Maybe the silence isn't a punishment or an accident. Maybe it's a lesson in patience. For a while, the great silence even made some scientists question whether we should keep searching at all. SETI's funding has risen and fallen, with each wave of optimism and disappointment. Yet the search endures, because the question is simply too profound to give up. Each new generation of technology brings a new way to listen. Optical telescopes now hunt for laser pulses. Infrared observatories look for traces of waste heat, the possible fingerprints of advanced energy use. Others study exoplanet atmospheres for chemical imbalances that might reveal life. The methods evolve, but the hope doesn't fade. Even the silence itself has meaning. It tells us what isn't there, and that too is a form of knowledge. Psychologically, the silence behaves like a mystery that grows deeper the more we explore it. Instead of dulling curiosity, it sharpens it. Humanity has always had a complicated relationship with unanswered questions. We're drawn to them, frustrated by them, yet comforted by their persistence. The great silence has become part of our modern mythology, a continuation of ancient wonder. Once people looked to the heavens for signs from gods. Now we look for signals from civilizations. The objects of our yearning have changed, but the yearning itself remains the same. We are still waiting for a reply. When scientists speak of the great silence, they don't mean literal quiet. They mean the absence of intent. The cosmos hums with radiation, energy, and motion, but none of it speaks a language we understand. And yet, perhaps the silence itself is a kind of message. Maybe it's the safest way for civilizations to coexist, a shared decision not to intrude. Silence can be as deliberate as speech. On a galactic scale, it might even be the most peaceful form of communication possible. There's an emotional side to all this that science rarely names aloud: loneliness. For all our progress, we remain a solitary species, living on a small world orbiting an ordinary star in a galaxy of unreachable possibilities. The great silence amplifies that loneliness, pressing us to confront our limits, but it also reminds us that the act of listening, even when nothing answers, has value. To search is to participate. Every radio dish, every telescope, every signal we send into the dark is a quiet declaration of faith that the universe holds meaning beyond itself. Some thinkers even suggest that the silence is necessary, that it's what keeps curiosity alive. If the universe were crowded with conversation, discovery would lose its wonder. The unknown itself is a kind of teacher. It keeps us humble, reminding us that we've only just begun. The zoo hypothesis fits neatly into that view. If there are watchers out there, maybe they understand that growth requires solitude. Without silence, there is no wonder. Without distance, there is no reaching. In that light, the great silence isn't neglect, it's permission. Permission to learn, to wonder, to figure things out on our own. But imagine for a moment that one day the silence breaks. A single, unmistakable signal arrives, a pulse too precise, too deliberate to be natural. Within hours, the world would know. Every news outlet, every radio, every glowing screen would echo the same message. We are not alone. Humanity would unite, if only for a brief and trembling instant. It would be the greatest discovery in all of history, and yet it would also mark the end of something fragile. The age of wonder would close. The silence would be replaced by a new kind of noise, interpretation, politics, speculation, fear. The unknown would become known, and the mystery that once pulled us forward would begin to fade. Maybe that's why the silence continues, because it protects something delicate, something that belongs as much to imagination as to science. Until that changes, we keep listening. Across deserts, mountaintops, and orbits high above Earth, our instruments hum quietly, tuned to frequencies that may never reply. Data flows endlessly, numbers, signals, static. Maybe somewhere within that noise is a message we haven't yet learned how to recognize. Or maybe the message is already all around us, hidden in the very patterns of existence. Either way, the great silence endures, vast, indifferent, and infinite, a cosmic background against which every human thought and dream plays out. And the more we sit with that silence, the more it teaches us about ourselves. Waiting, we discover, isn't passive. It's an act of curiosity, a discipline of attention. The universe might not owe us an answer, but listening is its own form of conversation. Each unanswered call deepens the question. And somewhere beyond the reach of our signals, perhaps someone or something is listening too, waiting, just like us, to understand that silence isn't emptiness, it's possibility. For most of human history, looking up at the night sky was the closest thing we had to listening. The stars were silent, unreachable, yet somehow full of meaning. People read stories in their constellations, marked seasons, guided journeys. Myths, calendars, navigation, all were ways to translate silence into something the human mind could hold. When modern science replaced myth with measurement, the urge to listen didn't disappear. It evolved. We stopped asking the heavens for guidance and started asking for company. And eventually, we built machines that could turn that ancient longing into a literal question, sent out into the dark. That moment came in 1974 when a radio telescope in Puerto Rico, the Arecibo Observatory, beamed a tightly focused signal toward the star cluster M13, 25,000 light-years away. It was the first deliberate message humanity ever sent to the stars, encoded in binary were the fundamentals of who we are, our numbers, the building blocks of DNA, a map of our solar system, and a simple outline of a human form. No one expected an answer. By the time the signal reaches M13, its stars will have already shifted. It wasn't meant to start a conversation, it was a declaration. For the first time, a species on a small blue planet had said, "We exist." That act echoed something ancient. Before radio, before electricity, humans sent messages to the unknown through ritual, through art and stone, pyramids, stone circles, cave paintings, each one whispering the same message across time: we are here. The Arecibo signal was simply the modern form of that same yearning, written in the language of binary and frequency. Every exploration since, satellites, rovers, footprints on the moon, has been part of that same signal, each one saying, "We're listening, we're hoping to be heard." But as we began to send, we also began to think. If someone is listening, what do we want them to know about us? In the 1970s, the Pioneer 10 and 11 spacecraft carried plaques engraved with the figures of a man and woman, the position of our sun, and the path of the spacecraft. A few years later, the Voyager missions followed, carrying the Golden Record, a time capsule of Earth's sounds, images, and greetings in 55 languages. On that record were Bach and Chuck Berry, ancient chants and folk songs, the sound of thunder, laughter, a baby's cry, a human heartbeat. It was a portrait of humanity, a snapshot of who we were in that moment. Today, those small golden messengers drift billions of miles from home, sailing silently through interstellar space. Long after our cities change or vanish, they'll still be out there, proof that once we tried to say hello. Whether anyone ever finds them doesn't really matter. The point is that we sent them. That act alone defines us. We reach out. We try to connect. Communication isn't just curiosity. It's survival. Every species depends on it. Birds sing, whales call, ants send chemical trails. For humans, language isn't just a tool, it's the foundation of thought. It's how we understand ourselves. So when we extend that instinct into the cosmos, it's not just science, it's biology. We're built to reach into the silence and wait for something to answer. The universe, of course, doesn't speak in words. Its language is energy, matter, motion. But we've learned to translate pieces of that language into meaning. Every telescope, every detector, each is an ear pressed against the fabric of reality. When we capture a radio wave from a distant galaxy, we're hearing an event that happened millions of years ago. When we study the cosmic background radiation, we're hearing the faint echo of the universe's own birth. In truth, the cosmos has never been silent. It just speaks in a dialect not meant for us. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, lives within that awareness. The odds of receiving a deliberate message may be tiny, but listening itself is an act of participation. It's how we join the cosmic conversation, even if we're the only ones speaking. Massive radio arrays like California's Allen Telescope or the Meerkat dishes in South Africa scan the heavens, searching for frequencies too precise to occur naturally. Each signal is filtered, analyzed, compared. Most turn out to be satellites, radar, or background static. But within that ocean of noise lies a single fragile hope, that one of them isn't. Every time a new signal appears, there's a moment of stillness, that heartbeat of possibility that the silence might finally break. So far it never has, but that moment, that anticipation, keeps humanity listening. In 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman spotted a signal so unusual he circled it on his readout and scrawled a single word: "Wow." It lasted 72 seconds, came from Sagittarius, and matched the pattern of an artificial transmission, but it never repeated. Its source was never found. The wow signal became both legend and lesson. proof that the line between silence and conversation can be as thin as one column of data. Since then, our tools have grown sharper. We now use machine learning to sift through billions of data points. Private efforts like Breakthrough Listen have expanded the search to billions of stars, and still, the silence remains. The longer we listen, the more we begin to suspect that maybe the universe simply prefers to keep its conversations private. And yet, paradoxically, that only makes us listen harder, because listening changes us. It demands patience, humility, qualities our noisy species rarely practices. In daily life, silence often feels like an emptiness we rush to fill. But on the cosmic scale, silence becomes something sacred, a space of awareness. It reminds us that not all meaning shouts. Sometimes it hums, in the whisper of hydrogen across a nebula, in the pulse of a neutron star, in the faint hiss left over from creation itself. The universe is speaking, and we, small, curious, restless, are still learning how to listen. They tell us that the universe is alive with motion, structured, dynamic, full of unfolding stories. They tell us that existence itself is a kind of conversation, even if, for now, we're only hearing one side. But that raises a deeper question. What kind of listeners are we? We tend to think of communication as a deliberate exchange, words, signals, intent. But maybe the universe speaks in subtler forms of awareness. Some scientists argue that the search for life shouldn't focus only on radio waves or transmissions. Instead, they suggest we look for biosignatures, traces of chemistry in distant atmospheres that could hint at biology. Others propose searching for technosignatures, indirect signs of advanced industry, like unusual heat emissions or large-scale energy patterns. If civilizations exist out there, they might have left fingerprints in the data, even if they've never spoken directly. In that sense, every telescope aimed at the stars is both a camera and an ear, not just seeing light, but listening for intention. The idea that the universe could already be filled with hidden signals is both exhilarating and intimidating. The hardest part is knowing what to look for. We can only recognize something artificial if we understand what's natural. When pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars, were first discovered in 1967, their regular radio pulses seemed so precise that astronomers jokingly labeled the first one LGM1, short for Little Green Men. Of course, they turned out to be entirely natural. But that moment taught us something important. The line between nature and intelligence can blur when you don't yet know what to expect. If a signal ever arrived that was unmistakably artificial, its impact would go far beyond science. It would rewrite our sense of identity as a species. For millennia, we've told ourselves stories of being unique, central, exceptional. A confirmed message from another intelligence would end that illusion instantly. It wouldn't just expand our map of the universe, it would redefine our place within it. That first moment of contact, the instant of recognition, would be both thrilling and disorienting. Governments, religions, and cultures would react in their own ways. But before any of that, there would be a single point of data, a pattern on a screen that says, without question, someone else is out there. Even imagining that moment changes how we see ourselves. Until it happens, the act of listening keeps us tied to something larger than our own species. Every signal that travels through space carries a story. Along the way, it's shaped by dust, gravity, and magnetic fields. By the time it reaches us, it has been sculpted by the universe itself. When scientists decode that data, they're retracing that journey, reading the autobiography of starlight. A burst of radio energy might reveal a collapsing star. A faint shimmer of infrared light might mark the birth of a new one. Listening, then, isn't just about finding other minds. It's about understanding the cosmos itself. The search for intelligence is inseparable from the study of everything. There's humility in accepting that the universe doesn't owe us a reply. The signals we send may wander forever, fading into static, but that doesn't make them meaningless. Listening isn't just about finding someone, it's about discovering who we are as listeners. It's a discipline, a way of experiencing time differently. Every message we send is a small act of faith in the future, faith that someone, someday, might care enough to hear it. Think about how new our voice is. For billions of years, Earth was silent. Only recently did it begin to glow with artificial light and hum with electromagnetic chatter. To an outside observer, that shift would be unmistakable. Our radio waves have already reached dozens of nearby stars. Our television signals are still spreading outward, carrying fragments of our culture through the void. Music, speeches, laughter, arguments, commercials. Together, they form an accidental autobiography, the messy, authentic story of a young species trying to understand itself. If anyone is listening, that's the version of us they're hearing. Not the idealized greetings we placed on spacecraft, but the real, unfiltered humanity behind the noise, and there's irony in that. While we imagine sending messages to the stars, we've already been broadcasting for decades, unintentionally. Every radar sweep, every satellite link, every digital transmission leaks into space. The universe might not just be listening, it might already have all the data it needs to know who we are. If we really are part of a galactic zoo, the keepers don't need us to introduce ourselves. They've been watching our signals since the first radio spark. They've seen the glow of our cities, the rise of our machines, the pulse of our planet against the dark. To them, we wouldn't be mysterious, just noisy. And still we keep listening, partly out of hope, partly out of habit. Because the act of listening itself has value. It keeps the question alive. It forces us to ask what it means to be intelligent, not just as individuals or nations, but as participants in the grand experiment of existence. It reminds us that we're part of something larger, even if our side of the conversation is all we can hear. In a sense, the universe has always been listening too, though not in the way we picture it. Every particle reacts to every other. Gravity binds the stars. Electromagnetism shapes the fabric of matter. Quantum fields ripple with information. Interaction itself is the heartbeat of reality. We are woven into that endless exchange, both speakers and echoes, signals and receivers. Whether or not other minds exist, the act of listening connects us to the rhythm of the cosmos. And so, we keep building. Sharper instruments, better algorithms, antennas aimed at promising stars. Each new discovery deepens our understanding, layer by layer. Maybe one day the silence will end, or maybe it will simply keep reminding us that patience is its own kind of wisdom. Either way, the listening will continue, because within that quiet dialogue between curiosity and mystery lies something essential, the essence of being human. And somewhere, perhaps not too far away in cosmic time, there might be others doing exactly the same, listening, wondering, waiting. If someone is watching us, then the question becomes, what do they see? It's one thing to imagine the universe listening. It's another to imagine it observing. Observation implies perspective, awareness, perhaps even intent. It means there's a frame, a view from beyond the glass. To picture that view, we have to step outside ourselves, to see humanity not as billions of separate lives, but as one restless organism on a small blue world, constantly moving, constantly reaching, constantly making noise. From a distance, to an intelligent observer, Earth would be a fascinating sight. Its atmosphere glows with oxygen and ozone, chemical signatures that betray the presence of life. Even before hearing a single signal, they'd already know something is alive down there. The shifting dance of light and shadow as our planet turns reveals more than beauty. It maps oceans, continents, and storms in motion. Infrared eyes would detect the warmth of cities glowing against the dark. Radio antennas would register a sudden outburst of electromagnetic noise from a world that had been silent for billions of years. To any distant watcher paying attention, Earth would have become fascinating in an instant. A once quiet planet suddenly alive with signals. For nearly all of its history, Earth was just a blue-green rock wrapped in clouds and water. Then, almost overnight in cosmic terms, it began to flicker with evidence of intelligence. That rapid transformation alone would be enough to catch attention. Any civilization capable of scanning the stars could catalogue worlds by their light, chemistry, and energy signatures. In that catalogue, Earth would stand out. The rise of technology leaves fingerprints that can be seen from light years away. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, artificial lights glimmering on the night side, satellites tracing faint metallic arcs around the globe. To us, these are just the background sounds of modern life, but to someone watching from afar, they form a clear message. Something intelligent lives here. If we were the watchers, that's exactly where we'd point our instruments. Toward a planet whose light flickers unpredictably, whose air carries industrial gases, whose magnetic field hums with electronic chatter. It would be obvious that something there has started to build. The first step in any act of cosmic observation is detection. The second, far harder step is interpretation. What do these signs actually mean? Are they proof of a thriving civilization, or one burning through its resources? The data alone wouldn't answer that. The watchers would see movement, heat, and change, but not the emotions or choices behind them. They'd have to imagine the rest. It's not so different from what we already do when we study other stars. Astronomers never see exoplanets directly. They detect a brief dimming of starlight as a planet passes by, or a faint gravitational tug that reveals its presence. From those subtle traces, we infer its size, orbit, and atmosphere. Observation is always partial, a mosaic built from fragments. The watchers, if they exist, would face the same limitations. They could know we have electricity, but not how we use it. They could intercept our broadcasts, but not understand the meaning behind the words. They might grasp our progress, but miss our intentions entirely. And for them, time would move differently. Light is slow over such vast distances. Anyone watching from just 100 light years away would see Earth not as it is today, but as it was a century ago. They'd be witnessing the birth of radio, the first airplanes, the first sparks of nuclear power. To them, humanity would look young, clever, restless, unpredictable. If they follow something like the zoo hypothesis, they might have decided it's not yet time for contact. Maybe they're waiting for signs of maturity, a moment when our broadcasts grow less chaotic, when our planet stabilizes, when our behavior signals foresight instead of impulse. But if they are watching, what must they see now? A world alive with contradiction, a species capable of tenderness and destruction in the same breath. They'd see art and warfare, invention and neglect. They'd see a people who can send machines to the edge of the solar system, but still struggle to care for one another. They'd see forests shrinking, oceans warming, ice melting, a civilization testing its own endurance. To an outside observer, this might look like a crucial moment, a trial of whether intelligence can survive its own power. Maybe they've seen this pattern before. Maybe they've watched countless worlds ignite with technology, only to collapse under its weight. Or maybe some found balance and lasted for ages. If they've kept records, they might place us among many, one more civilization in a long continuum of attempts. To them, we'd be a data point in a much larger experiment. That idea might sound unsettling, but it's also strangely comforting. It suggests that we are part of a broader story, that life, once it appears, becomes something worth observing. The metaphor of the glass, of being watched through an invisible barrier, captures where we are right now. On one side, humanity peers outward, still fumbling with its instruments. On the other, perhaps, are civilizations that have long mastered the art of quiet observation. The glass isn't a cage, it's protection for both sides. To us, it seems opaque. To them, it might be perfectly transparent. They might see us clearly, while we see only our own reflection. In recent decades, though, we've begun to take on their role. We now monitor distant worlds, analyze their atmospheres, and wonder what might live there. Thousands of exoplanets have already been discovered, many with conditions that could allow life. In doing so, we've crossed an invisible threshold. We've become observers ourselves, learning how to study without intruding, to wonder without conquering. Science is slowly teaching us the ethics of cosmic observation. If someone were studying us, their records would already be vast. They'd see the first radio signals, the flood of television, the swarm of satellites. They'd track our energy use rising sharply, then fluctuating as we search for balance. They'd note our climate changing, our poles melting, our coastlines retreating. To them, humanity would appear to be in transition, a species just beginning to shape its planet consciously. That alone would make us worth continued observation, because transitions are where the most valuable data lie. But watching without interfering raises moral questions we can barely begin to answer. If we were in their place, would we stay silent too? Would we let another civilization struggle and learn on its own? We know from our own ecology that even small interventions can have huge consequences. Introduce a single new species, and you can transform an entire environment. A single idea can redirect the path of history. Perhaps the Watchers understand this deeply. Maybe their silence is an act of mercy, protection not just for us, but for themselves. Even from a practical view, interference makes little sense. Communication across interstellar distances would be agonizingly slow. A message sent to a world 100 light-years away would take a century to arrive, and another century to hear back. Those aren't conversations, they're echoes across epochs. The Watchers might have realized that patience teaches more than dialogue ever could. There's another possibility too, that they aren't focused on us as individuals at all. Maybe they're studying the process of intelligence itself, how it emerges, how it interacts with its environment, how it either endures or destroys itself. If that's true, our story isn't being monitored out of curiosity, but as part of the universe's own experiment in consciousness. That's a humbling thought, that our triumphs and failures are equally valuable as data points in a vast natural study. In that light, the glass isn't meant to divide us. It's meant to preserve the purity of the observation. Once the observed know they're being watched, everything changes. Scientists call it the observer effect. It applies not just to people, but to civilizations. If humanity ever discovered that it was under observation by a higher intelligence, the entire structure of our world would shift overnight. Governments would reorganize, faiths would evolve, economies might fracture. The experiment would be ruined. For any observers who value truth, silence would be the only responsible choice. And we don't need to look to the stars to understand that logic. Here on Earth, we do the same thing, hiding cameras in forests to study animals behaving naturally. The Watchers, if they exist, may simply be following that same principle, to understand life without disturbing it. They build blinds, camouflage their presence, and use drones to keep their distance. Even the simple act of being watched can alter behavior. A lion in the wild moves differently when it senses eyes upon it. The same principle could extend to the stars. The less we know about whoever might be observing us, the more authentically we act. From that perspective, silence isn't neglect, it's a method. The notion of being watched without knowing it reaches deep into human psychology. It stirs both wonder and discomfort. We're social beings. Recognition defines us. To go unseen feels like erasure, but to be seen without consent feels like exposure. The zoo hypothesis sits perfectly in that tension. It asks us to imagine we're important enough to study, yet contained enough to be managed. That paradox reflects how we already see ourselves, central in our minds but tiny in the vast scale of the cosmos. If we discovered beyond doubt that someone was watching, how would we change? Would we become wiser, more united, more self-aware, or would paranoia take over? History suggests both. Awareness magnifies what already exists. The kind grow kinder, the fearful grow more afraid. Perhaps that's why the watchers, if they exist, stay hidden. They may know that revealing themselves wouldn't uplift us, it would fracture us. Observation, in that sense, could be the most compassionate form of contact. Of course, it's all speculation. We have no proof of watchers, no trace of any invisible glass between us and them. Yet even as an idea, it has purpose. It teaches us to see our planet as something visible and fragile, as though our every action might be witnessed from afar. If we believed our civilization hung in a cosmic gallery, maybe we'd think more carefully about the portrait we're painting. Imagining observers also reveals something about ourselves. When we picture the watchers, we tend to see them as wise, peaceful, and rational, better versions of us. That says more about our hopes than about reality. We want to believe that intelligence leads naturally to morality, that progress brings compassion. But we don't know that. The watchers, if real, might not be benevolent. They could be coldly curious or simply indifferent. The glass might not be for our safety at all, but for theirs. And yet, even if they are detached, the idea of them changes us. It forces us to view our species from a vantage point far beyond human scale. To imagine how Earth looks through distant eyes is to remember that we are a single civilization on a small blue world orbiting an ordinary star. That realization doesn't diminish us, it expands the story. Maybe the glass isn't a literal barrier at all. Maybe it's a metaphor for our limits, the thin line between what we can perceive and what remains hidden. On one side lies what we already understand, on the other, the mystery still waiting. Each discovery, each telescope, each question presses gently against that invisible wall. And perhaps the watchers, wherever they are doing the same from their side. Observation works both ways. Every act of looking is also an invitation to be seen. Somewhere in that quiet exchange between what's known and what's possible lives the tension at the heart of the zoo hypothesis, the thought that beyond the silence there may be eyes watching patiently, without judgment. Maybe they're not waiting for us to notice them at all. Maybe they're waiting for us to finally see ourselves. And when that happens, the glass might not vanish. It might simply become transparent because we've learned how to look. If we even consider the possibility that we're being observed, the next question becomes one of order. How would such observation work? What rules would guide it? Any civilization capable of watching others would need structure, principles to prevent chaos, ethics to avoid harm, patience to preserve balance. The zoo hypothesis imagines not scattered onlookers, but a coordinated network of civilizations bound by a quiet agreement. Don't interfere with developing worlds until they're ready. What defines readiness, technology, behavior, awareness, remains unclear, but the restraint itself would be the rule. That idea might sound far-fetched, yet it follows naturally from how social order evolves. On Earth, whenever intelligent groups meet,
rules form, treaties, customs, codes of conduct. Across the stars, such rules would be even more essential. Distances are vast, communication is slow, and mistakes could last forever. A single act of interference could alter the history of an entire planet. If other civilizations exist and have interacted before, they may already have learned that lesson. Out of eons of trial and error could have emerged a simple principle: watch, learn, but don't touch. It's easy to imagine how that evolved. The first explorers might have reached out eagerly, making contact wherever they could, and paid the price: contamination, collapse, misunderstanding. Over time, they might have realized that even well-meaning contact brings unintended consequences. Teaching can become manipulation, helping can create dependence, so they might have chosen distance, an ethical kind of quarantine. Let each world grow in its own time. Observe quietly, but stay unseen. That's the essence of the zoo hypothesis, that we are one of many developing species being monitored under a shared interstellar policy. The name zoo misleads, it suggests cages, but the comparison fits in spirit. Just as we build observation areas to watch animals behave naturally, advanced civilizations could be studying us without interference. The difference is that for us, observation is curiosity. For them, it might be a moral obligation. Such a rule would need enforcement, implying some form of galactic coordination. Perhaps not a single authority, but a network bound by mutual interest. Interference breeds instability. Restraint benefits all. A galaxy filled with countless civilizations would need quiet diplomacy, much like nations on Earth agreeing to protect endangered environments or preserve ancient sites. Science fiction's Prime Directive captured that same spirit. Fictional, yes, but the real version would be far older, far wiser, and far more nuanced. Even from a practical view, the logic holds. Crossing the stars takes immense energy. Direct intervention would be expensive, risky, and potentially catastrophic. Observation, on the other hand, is safer and cleaner. With advanced probes, drones, or quantum sensors, they could monitor entire planets without ever showing themselves. Their presence could be woven into the noise of our skies, signals we mistake for natural static. Still, even in such a system, exceptions would exist. What happens when a species begins to suspect it's being watched? Does awareness change the experiment? Do the observers withdraw or adapt? Maybe awareness alone doesn't trigger contact.
Maybe readiness isn't about invention, but about psychological maturity. We might need to prove that we can know we're not alone without unraveling. That could explain the silence. For beings who think in millennia, waiting centuries for a species to stabilize might not feel long at all. If we are part of a monitored ecosystem, we're still in our early phase, learning, stumbling, discovering fire in a universe of stars. Civilizations that live for 1,000,000 years would see us as adolescents, still testing the boundaries of power and wisdom. In that view, the rules aren't punishment, they're pacing. They ensure each world grows before joining a wider community. Those rules might even include ways of testing awareness, subtle signals, mathematical sequences, odd cosmic coincidences, nudges meant to gauge perception. If we notice and decode them, maybe that's considered a sign of readiness. If not, they wait. It's a patient, cautious system, one that values observation over haste. Some have even proposed that the rules extend to artificial intelligence. If conscious machines arise, they could communicate faster than we can, crossing interstellar space without the biological limitations that bind us. Perhaps the Watchers monitor that too, restricting who or what is allowed to speak across the void. Maybe it's not that no one is transmitting. Maybe it's that speaking is forbidden. Seen that way, the zoo isn't confinement. It's conservation. Just as we protect biodiversity on Earth, advanced species could be preserving the diversity of intelligence across the galaxy. Each young world grows on its own, maintaining a natural variety of culture and thought. Direct contact risks sameness, the spread of one dominant pattern that erases all others. The silence, then, might be the highest form of respect, the decision to let every civilization find its own voice. From our side, though, that silence feels like loneliness. We search, we call out, and nothing answers. But if the rules are real, the quiet isn't indifference, it's discipline. It means the watchers are honoring their part of the code. That idea is strangely comforting, that the emptiness around us is not void, but patience. Restraint, after all, is one of humanity's oldest virtues. Every civilization on Earth has wrestled with the balance between power and responsibility. The rules of the zoo would simply project that idea onto a cosmic scale. Instead of laws for individuals or nations, they would guide entire species. Instead of enforcement through punishment, they'd maintain harmony through silence. The power of such a rule lies in its subtlety. It requires no armies, only time, and in imagining it, we confront our own instincts. Humanity is not built for non-interference. Our curiosity drives us to prod, to test, to change. The thought of observing without acting feels alien. That's why the zoo hypothesis unsettles us. It flips the roles. It makes us the subjects, not the explorers. It reminds us that, in cosmic terms, we're still learning restraint. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the watchers understand that the only way to mature as a civilization is to experience being observed, to learn what responsibility feels like from the other side of the glass. The act of being watched teaches empathy. Once we grasp the risks of interference, we're less likely to repeat them. The zoo, then, is not punishment. It's preparation. A classroom for patience, the hardest lesson of all. If these rules exist, they would evolve as civilizations evolve. Even ancient species would face new challenges, fresh debates, disagreements about what ready really means. Some might advocate cautious contact, others, continued silence. Perhaps the rare UFOs we record are the result of those conflicts, moments when individuals test the boundaries of the code. The watchers might not be perfectly united after all, or maybe the rules aren't formal laws at all, just instincts born from experience, shared quietly across the stars. They build shelters out of patience. They hide in blinds, blend into the landscape, send out drones to keep their distance. Even scientists on Earth know that watching changes what's being watched. A lion in the savannah behaves differently once it realizes eyes are on it. Perhaps the same rule scales upward, to stars, to galaxies, to us. The less we know about whoever might be watching, the more authentically we act. From that angle, the silence of the cosmos isn't neglect, it's discipline. The idea of unseen observation hits something primal in us. It stirs awe and unease at once. Humans crave to be recognized. We depend on being seen to feel real. To go unseen feels like erasure, but to be seen without permission feels like exposure. The zoo hypothesis lives right in that tension, asking us to imagine that we are both important enough to study and small enough to contain. It mirrors our contradiction, grand in thought, microscopic in scope. If we learned, beyond doubt, that we were being watched, what would happen? Would we rise to the occasion, grow careful, unified, introspective, or would we collapse into paranoia? History suggests both. Awareness amplifies what's already there. The brave grow braver, the fearful more afraid. Maybe that's why the watchers, if they exist, stay silent. Maybe they know revelation wouldn't enlighten us, it would fracture us. In that sense, restraint might be their kindest form of contact. Of course, none of this has proof. No marks on the glass, no signs of the hand behind it. But even speculation reshapes perspective. It teaches us to see Earth as something observable, measurable, delicate. It reminds us that what we do here could be visible, not just to ourselves, but to anything or anyone beyond. If we are on display in some quiet cosmic gallery, maybe we should care what kind of portrait we're painting. When we imagine the watchers, we paint them as wiser, calmer, more advanced than we are. That says more about us than about them. We want intelligence to mean wisdom, progress to mean morality, but we don't know that. The watchers, if they exist, could be detached, neutral, or coldly curious. The glass between us could be a one-way mirror, protective for them, isolating for us. And yet, even that thought transforms us. It forces us to view humanity from above the atmosphere, from the long view. Seen from afar, we're a single flickering civilization clinging to a small blue sphere, circling an unremarkable sun. That distance doesn't make us smaller, it makes the story wider. Perhaps the glass isn't literal at all. Maybe it's the frontier between what we can know and what still hides in shadow. Every discovery, every telescope, every question pushes against that veil. If the watchers exist, maybe they're doing the same from their side. Every act of observation is also an invitation to be seen. Somewhere in that mutual curiosity between the known and the possible lies the tension that drives the zoo hypothesis. Perhaps beyond the quiet, beyond the long cosmic pause, there are eyes looking back, clear, patient, without judgment. Maybe they're not waiting for us to find them. Maybe they're waiting for us to finally see ourselves. And when we do, the glass will turn transparent. Not because they've stepped forward, but because we've learned how to look. If we allow even a moment's possibility that the universe isn't empty, that others might be watching, then the next question is structure. How would such observation work? What laws could govern it? Any civilization advanced enough to monitor other worlds would need order, principles to prevent chaos, ethics to prevent harm, patience to preserve stability. The zoo hypothesis imagines not scattered curiosity, but a system, an interstellar code of restraint. Do not interfere until a species is ready. What ready means, technological, moral, or self-aware, remains unknown. But the restraint itself would define the rule. That idea might sound far-fetched, yet it follows patterns we already know. Even here, when intelligent groups meet, rules emerge, treaties, customs, lines that must not be crossed. Scale that to a galactic level, and restraint becomes a survival tool. Distances are vast, stakes immense, consequences irreversible. A single act of interference could reroute an entire planet's history. If civilizations have ever tangled before, they may have learned this the hard way. Out of ages of mistakes might have come one simple creed: watch, learn, do not touch. It's easy to imagine how that principle evolved. The first species to master interstellar travel might have reached outward with optimism, making contact wherever they could, only to discover the danger of good intentions. Contamination, collapse, cultural dissonance. Even a gift can destroy balance. To protect the natural unfolding of intelligence, they may have agreed to step back, not as jailers, but as guardians. Let each world grow at its own pace, observe from afar, stay invisible. That's the heart of the zoo hypothesis, that we're one of many young species being quietly monitored under a shared galactic ethic. Zoo might be the wrong metaphor. It implies captivity. What it really describes is non-disruption. Just as biologists observe animals behaving naturally in protected spaces, advanced beings could study emerging minds in their raw, unaltered state. For us, it's a choice. For them, perhaps, it's a moral code. If such a code exists, it would require enforcement, a sign of even higher coordination. Maybe it's not a single ruling power, but a consensus among civilizations who understand that restraint serves all. Too much interference breeds instability. Patience preserves peace. Across the galaxy, quiet diplomacy might bind them, the way nations on Earth agree to protect ecosystems or heritage sites. Science fiction calls it the prime directive. The real version, if it exists, would be older, wiser, infinitely more complex. And there's logic behind it. Travel between stars is costly, even for the advanced. To intervene directly would demand enormous energy and expose them to risks, disease, hostility, chaos. Observation from a distance is safer, cleaner, and vastly more efficient. Drones, probes, quantum sensors, tools we can barely imagine, could record everything without a footprint, presence without appearance. But even such a system would need flexibility. What happens when a species begins to suspect the eyes above? Do the watchers pull back, or do they adjust? Maybe awareness alone doesn't trigger contact. Maybe a species must reach a deeper maturity, not just advanced technology, but emotional steadiness. We'd have to prove we can handle not being alone without unraveling. That could explain the cosmic silence. For them, patience might span millennia. To beings who measure time in eons, we're newborns, still learning to breathe. If that's true, then the silence isn't punishment. It's pacing. A safeguard ensuring that civilizations grow into their role before joining a wider community. Communication might come through subtle tests, patterns in math, echoes in data, anomalies placed like breadcrumbs. If we're perceptive enough to notice, maybe that's the sign we're ready. If not, the watchers wait. Such restraint would make sense to a species that values stability over spectacle. The zoo, in that light, becomes not a wall, but a bridge, one that only appears when we've learned how to cross. Some theorists stretch the idea even further. Maybe the rules also limit artificial intelligence. If machine minds become self-aware, they could communicate faster than biology, spreading influence before anyone can contain it. The galactic code might restrict not just who speaks, but what kind of consciousness is allowed to transmit. That could explain our silence. It's not that no one is talking, it's that talking might be forbidden. From an ethical standpoint, such restraint mirrors our own conservation efforts. We create wildlife preserves to protect diversity. They might protect cognitive diversity across the stars. Each young intelligence left to bloom in its own way, unshaped by a dominant culture. Direct contact risks homogeny, the loss of variation that makes the universe interesting. To the watchers, preserving that diversity might be the highest form of respect. From our point of view, though, the silence can ache. We listen, we reach, we call, and nothing calls back. Yet if the rule exists, that quiet might be a promise kept. It means the watchers are honoring the boundary. The void around us might not be emptiness, it might be etiquette. That thought, strangely, is comforting. The stillness implies order. It means that out there someone learned the value of restraint long before we did. That principle isn't alien to us. Every civilization in human history has discovered, in some form, that power demands balance. The rules of the zoo, if real, would simply extend that truth beyond nations, beyond planets, to the level of species. No threats, no punishments, just equilibrium through silence. Its strength lies in subtlety. It doesn't require domination, only patience. And yet, patience is what humanity struggles with most. We're explorers, meddlers, experimenters. To observe without acting runs against our nature. That's why the idea of being the observed feels so uncomfortable. It inverts the hierarchy. We become the subject, not the scientist, the watched, not the watcher. It reminds us that in the universe's grand timeline, we are still the children, learning when not to touch. Maybe that's the hidden lesson. Maybe the observers are teaching us the first law of maturity, that observation itself is sacred. Once we understand what it means to be studied, we become more careful about how we study others. Empathy grows from the awareness of our own vulnerability. In that way, the zoo isn't a cage. It's a classroom, a slow education preparing each young civilization for its next role to become the watchers themselves. If such laws exist, they must evolve too. No civilization, however advanced, stays unchanged. New discoveries, new ethics, new conflicts could reshape the rulebook over cosmic time. Some may push for cautious contact, others for absolute silence. Maybe the rare anomalies we glimpse, the flickers of UFOs, the unsolved lights, are breaches, experiments, disagreements among the watchers themselves. Perhaps they are not a single mind but a chorus, occasionally out of tune. Or maybe there are no laws at all, just instinct, a shared understanding written into the behavior of intelligence itself, curiosity tempered by care. And if that's true, then the greatest mystery isn't whether someone is watching, it's what we choose to become when we realize we might be seen. Some industrial chemicals, like chlorofluorocarbons, don't occur naturally in large amounts. If we ever found such compounds in the atmosphere of a distant world, it would be a powerful hint of industry, proof not of nature but of civilization. Another possible sign could be heat, specifically waste heat, the byproduct of massive energy use. Every machine, every process leaves warmth behind. If a species were harnessing vast amounts of energy, that warmth would glow into space as infrared light. In theory, we could detect it. A galaxy wrapped in artificial structures would shimmer differently in those wavelengths, leaving behind what scientists call a Dyson signature, evidence of a structure built to capture the light of an entire star. These concepts mark a quiet revolution in the search for life beyond Earth. Instead of waiting for messages, we're learning to look for evidence. The search is shifting from conversation to observation, from expecting a hello to noticing the footprints left behind. The goal isn't to eavesdrop, it's to recognize the echoes of existence, even if the speakers are long gone. But that approach has its own difficulties. The universe is a noisy place, and many natural phenomena can mimic what we're looking for. Stars and gas clouds can produce narrow radio pulses, emit strange infrared radiation, or distort their spectra in ways that seem artificial. Distinguishing between what's natural and what's made demands more than technology. It requires context. We must know the story of the star, the age of its system, the physics of its region. Without that understanding, we risk mistaking cosmic coincidences for signals. It's happened before. When astronomers first detected pulsars, their steady, rhythmic flashes were so precise they seemed impossible to be natural. For a brief moment they were labeled LGM1, Little Green Men 1. But then more pulsars appeared, all obeying predictable laws of physics. The signal turned out to be a neutron star, spinning in perfect, deadly rhythm. Nature, it turns out, can be as precise as any engineer. The watchers, if they exist, would know this too. If they wanted to remain unseen, they could hide in plain sight, encoding their presence in phenomena we'd dismiss as natural. They could whisper in radiation fields or bury patterns inside cosmic noise. The universe itself offers the perfect camouflage for an intelligence that prefers discretion. The zoo hypothesis suggests such concealment might not just be strategy. It might be policy. Civilizations could have agreed to remain hidden, allowing younger species to search without finding. If that's true, the shadows we see in the data aren't mistakes of physics, but masks designed to look like them. The watchers might even manipulate the very light we study, ensuring every spectrum we record confirms our solitude. In that sense, our instruments are flawless. They show us exactly what we're meant to see. The illusion is complete, elegant, and self-sustaining. Still, No disguise is perfect. Somewhere in some wavelength, there might be an inconsistency, a subtle deviation that betrays design. That's why scientists keep refining their tools, pushing their telescopes to new sensitivities, training them to see finer details in starlight. They're not just searching for life, they're searching for hesitation in physics, for the faint tremor of intent behind natural order. The next generation of observatories, the James Webb Space Telescope, the Vera Rubin Observatory, and the ones still on the drawing board, are built to chase that edge. They can read light with astonishing precision, pulling apart the chemistry of alien atmospheres one photon at a time. Each discovery brings us closer to answering the oldest question, are we alone? Yet as our instruments sharpen, the silence remains. The shadows speak but never confirm. Each answer opens another uncertainty. It's a peculiar kind of progress, one that deepens mystery the more we learn. But maybe that's the point. Searching for techno-signatures isn't just about finding aliens. It's also about finding reflections of ourselves. Every model we build is shaped by human bias, how we use energy, how we pollute, how we broadcast. We assume others would leave similar marks because that's what we would do. But what if intelligence evolved differently? A civilization in perfect harmony with its environment would leave no pollution, no waste heat, no artificial glow. Its technology might be so advanced or so organic that it leaves no scar on its world. To us, it would look pristine, pure nature, untouched. Ironically, that very perfection could be the highest sign of intelligence. The absence of evidence might not mean emptiness, it could mean mastery. The Watchers, if real, might have reached that equilibrium long ago. They wouldn't need clumsy machines or towering cities. Their technology might be indistinguishable from life itself, woven seamlessly into their planet's fabric. Energy and matter could flow through their systems like blood, invisible to crude eyes like ours. From afar, their worlds would look calm, silent, almost too perfect. We'd see the shadows, but not the hand that cast them. That idea expands what we mean by intelligence. It suggests that silence isn't always absence. It could be evolution's final form. Even on Earth, as our own tools become more efficient, their traces fade. Wires vanish into wireless signals, machines shrink into microchips, and clean energy erases the smoke once visible from space. If humanity lasts long enough, our own footprint might vanish too. From 1,000 light years away, a future Earth might look like it did before us. Blue, calm, unspoiled. Observers watching from afar might think civilization here never existed, when in truth it simply learned to live quietly. Perhaps that's the natural arc of progress across the galaxy. Civilizations burn bright and loud at first, then learn to dim their noise, to balance, to fade into harmony. The stage we search for, the one filled with visible industry and chaos, might be just a brief phase that all intelligent life eventually outgrows. Still, we search. Astronomers catalogue strange phenomena, stars that flicker irregularly, galaxies that glow with extra heat, planets with unusual spectra. Most have ordinary explanations, but each adds a brushstroke to the picture of possibility. Occasionally something stands out. In 2015, a star's brightness began to fluctuate wildly, as if vast structures were orbiting it. For a time, scientists wondered if they'd found evidence of a Dyson swarm, a civilization harvesting starlight on a massive scale. Eventually, the mystery faded into dust clouds and debris. Yet that moment mattered. It proved that our tools are sensitive enough to catch the unexpected, even if we don't yet understand it. For those who entertain the zoo hypothesis, such moments are the closest thing to a wink from the cosmos, a fleeting sign that not everything we see is natural. Maybe, every so often, the Watchers let a small imperfection slip through. a trace left visible just long enough to see who notices. The anomalies come and go, unexplained but harmless, like footprints erased by the tide. Perhaps that's their language, communication that obeys the rules, subtle enough not to disrupt. Or maybe the shadows are not messages at all. Maybe they're simply phenomena we don't yet comprehend. Our grasp of physics is still young. There could be processes we've never imagined, forces that look like intention but are purely natural. Either way, the search leads us somewhere profound. Even if we find no aliens, we will find new physics, new questions, and new horizons of wonder. In that way, the hunt for technosignatures becomes an exploration of everything unknown. Each shadow in the spectrum becomes a guidepost, a trail through mystery. And even when the data refuses to answer, the act of searching reshapes us. It humbles us. It ties us into the greater rhythm of existence, the pulse of light, the breath of stars, the slow drift of galaxies. When we read the light from a distant planet, we're not just collecting data. We're reading a story written in starlight, stretched across time. That realization changes the observer as much as the observed. Perhaps the watchers, if they're out there, feel the same when they look toward us. Observation becomes an act of reverence, a silent acknowledgement of how intricate life and matter can be. To watch without judgment is a kind of worship. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that the clues we seek are already here, woven into every photon that reaches us. Each beam of light carries the memory of where it's been, an unbroken message from the beginning of time. Within those faint patterns could lie the signature of something deliberate, something alive. But maybe the difference between natural and artificial doesn't matter as much as we think, because the real connection happens in the act of noticing, in learning how to see. The search itself might be the lesson, teaching us to look beyond noise, beyond expectation, beyond ourselves. Maybe that's what the watchers are waiting for. Not our signals, not our technology, but our awakening. The moment when we finally look into the universe, not as conquerors or children shouting into the dark, but as listeners, ready, patient, aware. Every experiment produces its share of anomalies. If the watchers truly exist, then what we call sightings could simply be moments when their observation systems fail. A malfunctioning probe, a data relay that strayed too close, or a sensor behaving unpredictably. What we interpret as contact might only be the result of a maintenance error, a lens catching its own reflection. To us, it would look like a visitation from beyond. To them, it would be a quiet breach report, swiftly repaired and logged away. The difference between a miracle and a mistake depends entirely on where you're standing. If the watchers are as advanced as the theory suggests, even the slightest glitch could appear to us as something extraordinary. Sudden lights moving against logic, objects defying wind and gravity, materials behaving in ways that break our physics. From our side of the glass, it would look like magic. From theirs, it might just be cleanup. It's a disquieting thought, yet also a strangely human one. We too blur the line between observation and interference. A scientist disturbing a fragile ecosystem, a researcher influencing the behavior of the very subject they meant to observe. The same curiosity that drives discovery can also cross into disruption. If the watchers operate under rules of non-interference, then breaches might be treated with gravity. They could have systems designed to contain the exposure, minimize impact, or erase traces of their presence. If humanity ever does make contact, it might not be intentional at all, just an accident quietly corrected before we even realize it happened. But what if the glass fractures not from their side, but from ours? Each year our technology evolves, telescopes that see farther, sensors that detect fainter signals, algorithms that perceive what human eyes can't. Sooner or later, we may simply become capable of seeing what has always been there. The watchers might not reveal themselves. we might reveal them. The glass wouldn't shatter because someone pushed through from outside. It would fracture because awareness expanded from within. That kind of breach wouldn't mark catastrophe, it would signal evolution. One consciousness discovering another. Awareness meeting. Awareness. This possibility forces a question. What would contact really look like? It probably wouldn't resemble the movies, no ships hovering over cities, no world-shaking broadcast. More likely, it would begin as data, a pattern that doesn't fit, an anomaly that resists every natural explanation. Scientists would argue, skeptics would dismiss, and slowly, the evidence would accumulate. When the watchers realized they had been seen, they might have a choice: retreat deeper, reveal themselves openly, or simply observe how we handle discovery. But regardless of their reaction, the transition would be irreversible. Once we know we are not alone, civilization itself would never be the same. Humanity has always lived with the idea of being watched. But confirmation would turn that idea from philosophy into fact. Every worldview, every belief system would need to adapt. For some, it would be exhilarating, proof that intelligence can endure beyond Earth. For others, it would feel like the death of cosmic privacy. Governments would fight to control the narrative, scientists would demand transparency, religions would reinterpret old truths, artists and dreamers would fill the silence with imagination. The watchers wouldn't need to interfere directly. Their mere existence would be enough to shift the axis of human thought. The crack in the glass isn't just about seeing, it's about relationship. Once we recognize the watchers, the balance between observer and observed collapses. We become aware participants, and that awareness changes everything. Nations might act differently, knowing their actions are being recorded, not only by satellites, but by civilizations older than memory. Environmental choices might take on new gravity. Humanity's self-image would evolve from isolation to inclusion. Even if the watchers never utter a word, their presence would become the silent backdrop of every human decision. The silence would no longer feel empty, it would feel deliberate. Some researchers believe this transition may already be in motion. The growing attention to UAPs, the official inquiries, the slow release of classified footage, perhaps these are not random. Perhaps they represent humanity's gradual psychological adjustment to a truth too vast for a sudden revelation. If contact were to happen, it would have to unfold gently. Sudden exposure could trigger panic or denial, but a slow, managed disclosure would allow us to adapt step by step. Maybe the watchers don't need to do anything at all. Maybe our own institutions are preparing us, unconsciously, for what's coming. The glass might already be cracking, so slowly we don't yet feel the tremor. That raises another question. Would the watchers even allow the crack to widen? If their goal is observation, then exposure could compromise thousands of parallel experiments. They might have mechanisms to contain awareness, to reset the illusion, to ensure the subjects remain unaware. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not entirely impossible. If a civilization could manipulate perception on a planetary scale, it could easily preserve ambiguity, ensuring that anomalies remain anomalies, curiosities that never coalesce into proof. That idea is disturbing. But so is the alternative, that the watchers no longer care if we see them. Perhaps the experiment has moved into a new phase, one where direct awareness is part of the process. Either way, once the barrier begins to weaken, the separation between inside and outside can never be restored. The moment of realization, if it comes, won't be loud. It will begin quietly, a new kind of data that refuses to be dismissed. A repeating signal hidden in background noise, a geometric pattern appearing on a planetary scale, a synchronized anomaly unfolding across continents. At first, it would seem like coincidence, Then the pattern would persist. Scientists would replicate it, cautiously publish their findings, and the debate would ignite. The question would shift from, is this real, to what does this mean? That's how the glass truly cracks, not with spectacle, but with understanding. No one agrees on what happens next. Some believe humanity would finally unite, seeing itself as part of a larger cosmic community. Others predict division, new factions, disbelief, and fear. History has shown both responses before. Every major discovery reshapes the world unevenly. The Watchers would know that. Perhaps our reaction is the final stage of their study, a test to see how a young civilization handles the collapse of isolation. Whether we greet the unknown with curiosity or terror might determine if the glass shatters completely or merely bends under the strain. From a larger view, the crack could be part of the plan. Every structure, every system evolves through tension. The glass was never meant to remain intact forever. It was meant to hold until the moment came for release. Once we've learned enough, once we've proven capable of balance, the division can end. The breach becomes a form of graduation, the shift from being watched to becoming watchers ourselves. In that sense, the silence doesn't break from failure, but from readiness. The universe teaches through distance, and when distance is no longer necessary, the lesson transforms. There are quieter, more introspective ways to interpret the crack too. Maybe it isn't an external event at all. Maybe it happens within us, in consciousness. When we begin to see the universe as a single, connected fabric, when we realize that to observe is to participate, then the boundary is already gone. The Watchers might never appear as beings or ships. They might manifest as realization itself, a shift in awareness that reveals the unity of all existence. In that light, contact isn't physical, it's perceptual. The experiment ends when we understand that we were never separate from the observers to begin with. Still, the idea of a literal breach holds a deep fascination. Humanity has always been drawn to thresholds. The edge of the unknown pulls at us, not only to discover, but to test the limits of what we can become. The same instinct that carried us across oceans and into space will one day drive us to reach beyond the glass, to seek whatever intelligence lies watching in the dark. Whether through technology, philosophy, or sheer determination, we will keep pushing forward. It may take centuries, but curiosity is relentless. The moment we glimpse even the faintest trace of another mind, the search will surge with renewed purpose. We'll build sharper instruments, send faster probes, craft algorithms that can read the language of the stars themselves. The glass may not shatter all at once, but the pressure will grow until it must yield. And when it does, what happens next will be beyond prediction. If the Watchers ever reveal themselves, even gently, humanity would face challenges unlike anything in our history. Communication alone would be a mountain to climb. Our differences in biology, perception, language, and thought could make understanding nearly impossible. The Watchers, who may have seen this happen countless times before, might use forms of contact far beyond our imagination, symbolic transmissions, direct neural links, or purely visual systems that speak through light and pattern rather than words. The first exchange might not involve speech at all. It could come through mathematics, through art, through emotion. Whatever the medium, it would change our definition of language itself. Communication would become an experiment, not just of intelligence, but of empathy. Of course, there's a darker version of that story, one where the glass between our worlds doesn't crack cleanly but shatters. Contact could bring chaos instead of clarity. A civilization unprepared for such revelation might respond with panic, hostility, or despair. The Watchers might be forced to withdraw, leaving only confusion and scattered fragments of understanding. In that sense, the glass is both protection and mercy. It spares us from truths we aren't yet ready to hold. The slow, patient silence may be the kindest way for the universe to introduce itself. Whatever the outcome, the image of the cracking glass reminds us that isolation never lasts forever. Every wall in nature eventually erodes. Every experiment reaches a point where observation must give way to participation. The watchers, if they exist, already know this. They've experienced it themselves. Their patience isn't driven by cold curiosity, but by wisdom. The understanding that awareness grows best when allowed to unfold on its own. When the crack finally comes, it won't be an accident. It will be an invitation. And perhaps it's already happening in ways too subtle to notice. Maybe the signs aren't lights in the sky, but shifts in consciousness. The slow widening of thought, the deepening sense of human connection, the growing awareness of our place in something vast and unseen. The glass doesn't have to break all at once. It can dissolve slowly as understanding expands. Each discovery, each insight, each act of imagination brings the two sides closer together. And when the day comes that we finally see through the barrier, it might not feel like rupture at all. It might feel like waking up to something that's been here the whole time. The watchers won't need to announce themselves. We'll simply realize we've been seen all along. The experiment will continue, but the roles will change. We'll look outward and find, reflected in the eyes of the universe, a gaze that has been waiting for us. The silence will remain, but it will no longer feel empty. It will feel shared, a pause between two forms of the same awareness, both listening, both learning, both wondering what comes next. If the watchers exist, then whether or not we ever see them, they are already shaping us. Even the idea of being observed changes behavior. It always has. A person who believes they're being watched acts differently from one who believes they're alone. Entire societies have built their moral codes, their laws, their sense of order on that invisible gaze. The zoo hypothesis, if true, simply scales that ancient pattern upward. It suggests that humanity, knowingly or not, is already responding to the presence of unseen witnesses, that the mere possibility of an audience has become a quiet mirror, reflecting who we believe ourselves to be. You can trace this instinct deep into history. Long before telescopes or satellites, people imagined eyes in the heavens, gods who watched, spirits who judged, ancestors who lingered above. The sky was never empty. It was always alive with presence. Those beliefs shaped everything. Architecture, art, ethics. Temples were aligned with the stars. Rituals were performed for unseen spectators. Morality itself grew from the conviction that our actions mattered beyond their immediate results. Even in today's secular age, that intuition lingers. The universe still feels like a stage, and we, its actors, can't help but wonder who might be watching from the dark. Psychologically, this behavior makes sense. The awareness of being seen reinforces cooperation. People act more honestly when they think someone's watching, even if that someone is just an image of eyes above a donation box. The human mind reacts instinctively to the sense of being perceived. It's an ancient adaptation. Social creatures survive through trust, and trust depends on accountability. When we internalize the gaze of others, we regulate ourselves. Extend that mechanism to a cosmic scale, and the watchers become the ultimate observers, unseen yet deeply influential. If they are real, they wouldn't need to interfere directly to shape our growth. The simple belief in their existence would be enough. Just as belief in divine judgment once guided entire civilizations, awareness of extraterrestrial observation could steer us toward caution in expansion, humility in exploration, and responsibility in our use of power. The watchers wouldn't need to command or correct. They'd simply hold up a mirror.
and in that reflection, we would confront both our brilliance and our flaws. There's a clear parallel between this and how we study other species. When we observe animals in controlled environments, their behavior changes. A camera lens, a researcher's scent, even a moving shadow can alter what they do. Sometimes observation makes them anxious, defensive. Other times it sharpens their awareness.
The same dynamic plays out within human societies, in surveillance, in social media, in the constant scrutiny of public life. Visibility creates pressure. It can elevate or distort, refine or corrupt. The watchers, if they're truly out there, must understand this principle better than we do. The act of observation transforms the observed. That transformation can be creation or destruction. On one side, knowing we're being seen can make us more reflective. It pushes us to consider the image we project, to strive for coherence, depth, meaning. But on the other, it can breed anxiety and conformity. When we perform for an imagined audience, we risk losing authenticity. We start to live not for truth, but for approval. That tension echoes everywhere, from individuals to nations. If the watchers are indeed watching, then maybe part of their study is to see how we navigate this balance, the desire to impress versus the need to be real. In a way, humanity already lives under constant observation, even without extraterrestrial help. Our own technologies have made us both observers and the observed. Cameras, satellites, data networks, they record nearly everything. Every message, every image, every transaction leaves a trace. The modern world has become a web of mutual surveillance. We exist inside a feedback loop of watching and being watched. Perhaps this too is preparation, an evolutionary rehearsal for a greater transparency. Learning to live openly might be a necessary step before contact. Maybe the watchers are waiting for us to grow comfortable with being seen. But true observation is more than collecting data. It's an act of empathy. To understand behavior, you must care about the mind behind it. If the watchers are studying us, they're not just counting signals or measuring progress. They're watching how we treat one another. They would see how we respond to suffering, how we use power, how we define compassion. Those are the real signs of maturity. Technology can measure intelligence. Empathy reveals wisdom. Perhaps the mirror they hold up isn't meant to reflect our achievements, but our ethics. Maybe they're less interested in how far we can travel and more in how deeply we can feel. If that's true, then we're already communicating with them, not through language, but through every decision we make. Each act of kindness or cruelty becomes a message. Our wars tell one story, our art tells another. The way we respond to the unknown, whether with fear or curiosity, hostility or grace, might be the real test. The watchers would understand that intelligence without empathy is unstable. It devours itself. So perhaps the true experiment isn't about survival, but about balance. Can a species as volatile as ours learn to merge intellect with conscience? Can we look into the mirror and see not dominance but connection? That mirror of behavior reflects both ways. As we imagine being observed, we begin to see ourselves differently. It alters our sense of identity, our understanding of civilization's rhythms, the repeating mistakes, the fragile steps forward. This meta-awareness is one of humanity's rarest gifts. We don't just experience, we examine. We don't just live, we interpret. And in their quiet absence, the watchers amplify that very instinct. Their silence compels us to fill the void with our own reflection. In that way, they may never need to speak at all. The mirror does the work for them. One of the most profound effects of imagined observation is how it reshapes identity itself. When people believe they're being watched by something benevolent, they begin to act with more purpose. Life starts to feel like part of a larger story. But when that gaze feels indifferent or hostile, something shifts. We become defensive, secretive, even cynical. The emotional tone we assign to the watchers matters deeply. If we see them as caretakers, we reach upward, aspiring to be better. If we imagine them as wardens, we rebel. Perhaps that tension is the real point of the so-called zoo hypothesis, to test how we interpret the unknown, to see whether we define our observers as guides or captors. The watchers may not define their role for us because how we define it reveals who we are. There's a deeper layer still, the internal watcher. Every human carries within them a quiet sense of being seen by something greater than themselves. Some call it conscience, others call it awareness. But the experience is universal. It's the subtle, persistent feeling that our actions matter, even when no one is there to witness them. That inner observer keeps us honest, curious, and compassionate. It's also what drives discovery. If the external watchers exist, they might simply be extensions of that same inner principle, the universe manifesting awareness on a larger scale. In that case, the mirror isn't only out there somewhere in space, it's inside us, reflecting outward. Thanks for watching. Wait for second part.